Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday as Bill sees it meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Bill W., who's coming to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open for general sharing, or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, Bill. It's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you all this morning. I've had the gift of sobriety since December the 27th of 1972. So I have been at this thing for a while, and your story kind of grows. I really have to kind of shrink this thing down to stay within the 40-minute limit, but I'm going to do the best I can. I chose the topic of spiritual awakening or spiritual experience because it's been very meaningful to me for a very long time. And in reflecting on what I might share this morning, it kind of came into context. Just before the meeting, we were speaking about aligning ourselves time-wise. And that's really a word I've come to love, to be aligned with that power that's greater than myself, and to be aligned with you all. So alignment, I don't know if you ever had your tires aligned, but they send you a thing back and, this is out of whack, that's out of whack, we got to tweak this little thing. So keeping an eye on that has been really important to me over the years. I want to start briefly, just giving a bit of my story that I came from New York City with a long line of alcoholics. Every male member of my family was an alcoholic. Half of the women were. And my dad was a really abusive, terrible alcoholic, never did get sober. And, a lot of people have suffered a hell of a lot more than I have in living in an alcoholic home, but I gathered my scars, shall we say. I got locked in the closet, beaten with a belt, and when I got hit with the buckle end of the belt, I kind of figured something was really wrong here. Up until then, I figured I deserved it. So we talk about a state of consciousness. My state of consciousness changed at about 8 or 9 years old when my father came home drunk and was tearing up the furniture in the house. And my mother took my two sisters and myself down to the sidewalk. I was looking up as people stopped and stared at the noise coming from the apartment. I said to myself deep inside, "You son of a bitch, you're never going to hurt me again." And I put the final brick in a wall that I had been slowly building around myself. And I wanted to keep him out, but what I wound up doing was keeping you out and keeping me stuck in. I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, that is exactly what happened. And that was a state of consciousness. It was a protected state of consciousness, but it was a very limited one. At 12, something changed. I won a bottle of wine at a church bazaar. I remember the number I bet on because this was an important event in my life, And the guy gives it to me. He says, "You're going to take this home to your dad, aren't you?" I said, "Absolutely." So a buddy and myself went behind the garage, and that was my first drunk. And that was a change of consciousness. It took me to a place inside where I felt protected, alive, connected in a distorted sort of way, but connected. It was euphoria, and I loved it. Puked my guts out, got sicker than a dog. But I couldn't wait to get back to that again. And then I chased that for another 15 years. Part of my story is, someone said they liked the background of my office here. Yeah, I'm really good at looking good on the outside which is very different from what the hell's going on the inside. You know, there's a distortion, a non-alignment, let's say, with those two centers of consciousness. I always tried to do good things. That's just part of my makeup. I was a good deed doer, you know, and I had to balance doing good deeds and getting drunk. It became rather difficult over time, you know. So I did good deeds. I taught high school in New York City. I worked with orphan kids in the Bronx. I went into the Peace Corps in West Africa. I worked on a kibbutz in Israel. I was always kind of running away, and I would do really well at a new position for about 6 months, and then my drinking would start to catch up with me. So I had to run again. All right. So I was a pretty good runner, you know, and what happened then was I was running out of places to run to, you know. I actually, I was in the Jesuits. I was studying to be a Catholic priest at the time. I was in Detroit, and things were going badly, let us say. I'm stealing wine and taking it back to my room, drinking gallons and gallons. And the stuff was about to hit the fan one more time. You know, that was the story of my life up until then. Hits the fan, I run, and what I was thinking of doing at that time was I was going to run to two places. One was Australia, and I was just going to stay drunk for the rest of my life. I don't know. A lot of us wind up in Australia. I love those people down there. And the other thing I was going to go to India, and I was going to get holy as hell. I was going to join an ashram. You know, those are my two choices. That's where life had taken me. And then I heard a voice in my head. All right. And that voice said this to me. I will never forget it. I know exactly where I was when I heard it, and I knew it wasn't my voice. And the voice said, Bill, you are 27. If those are your two choices, there's something wrong with you. Now, I had kind of lived my life on the basis, if I am disturbed, there's something wrong with the people around me. I guess I misread that section of the literature. There's something wrong with the people. So I changed the people around me. But this time, I knew there was something wrong with me. And if I went to Australia, I wasn't going to heal it. If I went to India, it wasn't going to be healed. I had to face myself. And I had been in AA prior. I stayed sober for about 3 or 4 months, but it was all intellectual. It was not at the heart level, you know. And I went back to a counselor that I had worked with in Detroit, and he said, you know, Bill, you're not at a physical bottom. You can probably drink for 10 more years, but you are at a spiritual bottom. You are at an emotional bottom, and you're not going to make it 10 more years. And I knew he was right. And he asked me, am I willing to go to any length to get sober? And, you know, 3 days before, if he'd asked me that, I'd have fudged it. And 3 days later, I'd have fudged it. But at the moment he asked me that, I was broken. I was deeply broken inside. And I was willing to do anything. And so what he said was, I want you to go to and live at the Salvation Army in downtown Detroit. And I want you to look at every alcoholic and addict that you meet. Look them in the eye. And I want you to be able to say, there but for the grace of God go I. And for whatever reason, I did that. The Jesuits gave me a leave of absence from the novitiate, which was kind of unheard of. But they really liked me, you know. I don't know why, but they really did. And they said, maybe this guy can get his stuff together and come back. Well, I went down there and I worked spot labor jobs for a year. I went to AA meetings for a year, every day. And my consciousness began to change. I got to stay with that theme, because that's, I think, what you guys are about here. You pick a reading and you gotta stay tuned into it somewhat. Okay. So my consciousness began to change. I began to get honest. I began to get open. Um, I'm going to fly through the next 20 years. I left the Jesuits. I got married. They were a liberal group, but they weren't that liberal, so I had to get out. You know, I did. I would say quite well for 20 years of recovery. I became a counselor, worked with alcoholics and addicts, kept my AA and my work very, very separate, distinct. I'd kind of sneak into meetings and nobody would know I was an alcoholic and such. I mean, a counselor. They knew I was an alcoholic. I would do that. And then at about 20 years, all right, so I'm 20 years sober. And I had worked the steps. I had done the deeds. I was a good little AA guy. You know, I would say that. I measured up pretty well with most people, hey? But something was missing still. Something was missing. And what was missing is the subject of our conversation today. The spiritual alignment was not what it should be. All right? The reading says he had laid hold of a source of strength he had denied himself before. Well, I had done that. I was kind of staying sober. I had done the steps. I had done the meetings. I had stayed connected, but it was at a level that was proving not to be sufficient for me to experience peace of mind and a genuinely altered state of consciousness. I had kind of come to the point where I was getting bored with AA, just to be very frank, you know? And I've seen this happen to people at 20 years. Some it's even sooner, but it comes to a point where you're ready for something new. And I think at that time, the universe tends to respond in some way. It kind of knows, okay, this guy needs more, and maybe he's ready for more. So a series of things happened to me very quickly over a period of a couple of months that changed my consciousness one more time. And the first was I'm out in West Texas, and I go to dinner. I was out there on business, and I go to dinner with a guy who I tell him what's going on. You know, I said, AA is feeling flat for me. You know, it just doesn't have the juice anymore. Had it at one time, but I feel like I'm losing it. And he asked me if I had ever heard the story of the 5 M's. And he said it was the story of spiritual institutions. It could be the church. It could be a club. It could be an AA group. It could be AA itself. And he says that institution, it could be a treatment center, because I had a lot of experience with those. But that institution loses sight of something. So this is the story of the 5 M's. This story changed my life, really began that process. He said it starts with a man. And the man could be Buddha, the man could be Jesus, the man could be Moses, the man could be Bill Wilson. But that man has a change of consciousness, all right? A spiritual experience where he touches God and God touches him. There's a connection that cannot be denied. And like the reading says, it transforms us. It transforms us. So that man comes back, he said, with a message. And the message is who you are. And who you are ain't who you thought you were. It's very different, okay? It's very different. And it changes your whole psyche, your whole mind. It is transformation. These people are transformed in some way. So that's the message. the second M. And the third M, he said, then is the movement. The movement, the early days when, we say it's a program of attraction. People get attracted to what we're doing because we are transformed. So you go back to the early, the disciples with Jesus, the tribe of Jews running through the desert out there, it's an attraction because they've laid hold of something that other people are looking for. And that's what happened in the early days of AA, isn't it? That, it began to grow. It began to mushroom. All the drunks who got a hold of it, they were looking for that. At some deep part of their psyche, something was missing and they knew it, And they were looking for something more than just not drinking. They were looking for peace of mind. They were looking for connectedness. And those people had it. And we wanted what they had. I mean, I remember coming into AA originally, and I saw some people who had suffered a hell of a lot more than I had, but who had laid hold of so much more than I had. And I wanted what they had. All right? And they were kind of leading me down that path. So there's the movement, the early days. And but then there comes the fourth M, he said. And the fourth M is when they organize the thing. So we got this man, he's got a message, the movement was going, but now we got to organize it, So we need to bring in the attorneys. We need to become a nonprofit organization. We need to bring in the secretaries and, get a charter and all this sort of stuff. And now if you want to belong, you got to believe this. You got to do this. It's very organized. It becomes very mechanical. All right. And when I look back, that is what AA had become for me. It had become mechanical. I was doing the deeds, but I wasn't reaping the rewards. I wasn't aligned with the source. All right. I wasn't genuinely connected to it. So that's the machine stage. And a hell of a lot of us alcoholics stay sober, and you can stay sober. Or at least you can stay dry. Going to meetings, you have a problem, go to another meeting. You have a problem, go work this step again, But it's missing the connectedness. That route for me, and I can only speak for me, was missing that sense of inner connectedness. All right, so and then he said the fifth stage, after the machine stage, all right, is the mausoleum or the monument. It becomes dead. And the guy asked me, he said, "Hey, Bill, have you ever been to a dead AA meeting?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I have." "You ever been to a dead treatment center?" "Oh, yeah, I've seen them." "You ever been to a dead church?" "God, the world is full of them. It's filled with them." That's the mausoleum. That's the monument. The thing dies. Well, once he told me that story, I had an understanding of I had been looking for transformation outside of myself. I had been looking for it in an organization, and the organization, it can lead you to it, but it can't provide you with what you're looking for. That is an internal sense of connectedness, meaning, and purpose. What does the reading say? That we're going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, that we've been transformed, that we've laid hold of a source of strength that we had denied ourselves before. So I looked and yeah, that was what I had done. My association with AA had become mechanical, and that wasn't going to last. I was starting to dry up. The juice was missing. So there's that one story that really grabbed my attention. And very soon after that, I was actually up in Tennessee, and I went to an AA meeting, and there was a woman in the back room, and she was playing solitaire. Okay, and it was a clubhouse deal, and she's playing solitaire. And I come in for the 5 o'clock meeting, and I said, the 5 o'clock meeting here? Yeah, it's here, honey. You just sit down, and it's going to begin in just a few minutes, honey. We'll get it going. She's playing cards. She's playing cards. 5 or 6 more people drift in. 5 o'clock comes around. And I swear to God, this is a true story. She's dealing the cards, and then she says, "Hi, everybody. My name is Mary, and I was an alcoholic. And I was going to lead your meeting today." And I said, "Holy shit. The machine is here. We're not going to meet. We're going to go through the motions." And Mary is going to keep dealing the cards. I swear to God, that was a true story. And I said, "Oh, the guy was right. AA can become mechanical. All right. And it can lose its meaning." So I took that one into my consciousness. And very shortly after that, I was in Oklahoma City. And I mentioned at a meeting, I'm kind of looking for some more. And the guy said, "Hey, you need to go meet old Earl." Earl was an AA archivist. He was in charge of the archives for the state of Oklahoma. And he was really interested in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you were going to do your fourth or fifth step in Oklahoma City, you went to Earl's house on a Wednesday night, and he would teach you how to do it. And so I went there and knocked on his door, told him who I was. He was kind of excited about that. 20 years sober and lost. Oh, this is good material. So I came. He says, "I hope nobody comes." And as it turned out, nobody came that night. And so at 7 o'clock, he gets up and he locks the door. And I spent then 3 hours with this guy. And what he did in that short period of time was he introduced me to the original program as he had studied it for years. He was a student of the Oxford group. He was a student of early AA. He was back there where those men and the message was being developed. And it had changed him, and his hope was that it was going to change me. Example, he said, "Bill, have you taken the third step?" I said, "Well, of course I've taken the third step." He says, "Well, did you take it with somebody?" I said, "No, I take it with myself every day. I just take it with myself." He said, "Well, that's not the way they did it." I said, "Well, how did they do it, Earl?" He said, "Well, if you're willing, would you get down on your knees with me and give your life to God?" Well, I was kind of embarrassed to do that. I don't. My prayer life is as private as my sex life, let us say. Okay, so I don't share that readily with people. I was not used. I'm not an evangelical kind of guy. He said, "Would you do that?" Okay, I'll be willing. So I get down on my knees. I said, "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to say the third step prayer?" He says, "I wish you wouldn't." Meaning that's mechanical. Just come from your heart. Just give your life to God. And okay, I'm starting to trust this guy. He had what I wanted. I knew it. I could look in his eye and I knew I wanted what he had. And so I did that. And lo and behold, what happened? Something shifted in my heart. Now I'm really good at my head level. I'm pretty good up there. All right. I suck at my heart level. This from here to here, I think they measured it about 18 inches. It is the longest distance in the world. Okay. But to really get this thing, you gotta move from here to here. And my heart had been blocked ever since I put that last brick in. And, when my father's breaking up that furniture, it's like, you're not going to get to me. And I had to start taking those bricks down. All right. Well, he described to me a program that was quite different from the one I had learned about, had been taught. Some things were very much the same, and I got enough of it to stay sober and have relative peace of mind, but I was missing a big chunk of it. And what he did for me opened the door to that. When I left and he basically took me through the steps in about 3 hours' time. But I was hearing them in a different language, in the language of the pioneers, let's say. And I left his home. He's a very generous man. Left his home with a stack of books that he gave me on the Oxford group, on early AA, on that sort of things. And when I started plowing through those, there was something that really struck me. And that was this thing. It was how they did the 11th step. Of course, they didn't have steps in the early days. I'm talking about that period when Wilson got sober, Dr. Bob got sober, and the theoretical first 100. There actually weren't 100, but Wilson thought that number sounded pretty damn good. So he said there were 100 of us, So this was the program that they were working in. It was basically the Oxford group program that was getting tweaked and changed and adapted, let's say, to alcoholics who found some things too religious, and they didn't want that, but they wanted to get the essence of it. Well, the thing that struck me most was how they did the 11th step. And it was a process that they called two-way prayer. And what they said was it wasn't meetings that kept people sober in those early days. Meetings were helpful. They were helpful, no question about it. But it wasn't the thing. The thing was prayer and meditation. That was where the transformation happened, during a morning quiet time, when people listened for the voice of God within, and then wrote down their thoughts that came to them during that time. Some of you old timers would certainly remember the 24-hour book, the 24-hour prayer and meditation book. I grew up on that thing. Well, I maybe I knew it, but I certainly forgot it. But the meditations in that book were actually the two-way prayers of two women in England, who wrote down the voice that they were hearing inside of their minds. They had problems. They took those problems to God, and then they listened for guidance. Well, I started doing that, I didn't tell my wife I was doing it because she'd think I was crazy. What are you doing? Well, I'm in my office. I'm listening to God. Oh, okay. I knew you were nuts. It was just a matter of time. 20 years. That's not bad. But I started doing it. And I started hearing things. Now, just like I heard that voice in my head, that said, Bill, you're 27. If those are your choices, there's something wrong with you. Well, there was something wrong with me. I wasn't really listening for God's voice. So I started practicing it, doing it. I did it for 10 years by myself. I didn't tell too many people I was doing this. But then some other people came along and they said, well, what are you doing? And I told them. And I taught them how to do two-way prayer. And a lot of them started to change. A lot of them found the thing that had been missing in their life. So I want to share with you a two-way prayer from a woman from England. Did workshops during the pandemic when that was going on, and had a lot of people who I was able to introduce this practice to. And this is one of the more beautiful examples, I think, of what a two-way prayer sounds like. Asked her permission if I could use it. And she was in AA, but she was also in Overeaters Anonymous. And here's her prayer. And I think of this as it's like the 10th, 11th, and 12th step. And I get in trouble with AA fundamentalists because I tell them Those are the only steps I work these days. 1 through 9 in the original program, they take you through that, relatively fast. But then you live in 10, 11, and 12. You live there. All right. And every element I have found of the first 9 steps is really present in 10, 11, and 12. So it's not like you disregard them, but it's like you're not playing AA bingo where you're going back to step 6, then you're going back to 9. And then, it's like a billiard ball thing, 6, 9, 11, it gets a little crazy, but that's the machine. That's the machine. So 10, 11, and 12, you get them all there. So 10, what do? You take your inventory. You look for your connectedness. Am I joined with? Am I aligned with the inner voice? One mystic, and I believe alcoholics, many of us are mystics. We're looking for that mystical connection because we found it in alcohol. And what they told me was, you better find something that feels better than alcohol and drugs, or you're going to go back to them, And what feels better? What feels better is love. What feels better is honesty. What feels better is unselfishness. It's the 4 standards, the 4 absolutes that were the center, the heart of the Oxford Group program. Wilson was asked, where did you put those things? He said, I put them in steps 6 and 7. When I found that little footnote in Ernie Kurtz's book, it was like, oh, there it is. There they are. But Wilson thought that would be too much for an alcoholic to handle, so we're not going to mention them. So we did the opposites. So step 10, I look at myself. Am I connected? Am I joined with, or am I not? And if I'm not, then I need help with that. And I ask God for help, and then God speaks to me. And that's 11. And then in 12, you go out there and you do the guidance that you receive. Here's this woman's prayer. She says, my Heavenly Father, I've been struggling with self-loathing. I look in the mirror and I hate who I see. I feel so unattractive. And at my core, I feel unlovable. Please help me, Father. Well, there's a beautiful step 10, and it's not very mechanical. It's from the heart, eh? I could feel that as soon as she said it. God responds to her. And I encourage people to use a term of endearment. Put those words in God's mouth. My beautiful son, my darling daughter. So God says to her, my precious child, it saddens me when you are hurting so. You are loved more than you could ever conceive. I've watched you over these past several years go through some painful losses, especially the loss of your grandson. My sweet darling daughter, come to me. I am real and I am safe. Treat yourself as you would your own beloved child. Nourish your body, for it is my gift to you. Speak only love to yourself. Treat others as you wish they would treat you. Do these things, and the light of my deep and endless love for you will fill you and shine through you onto others. You will know self-love. You will begin to receive all the desires of your heart. Go now. I am with you. For years I read meditation books, and I don't read them anymore. I write my own. It's much more meaningful, because my problems are my problems. And the great reality, as the big book says, is within. And what two-way prayer is all about, what the 11th step for me is all about, is conscious contact, conscious connection with that source that is within. It's within you, it's within me. And it has business with us. It has guidance for us to do, And so when I'm making a major decision, I go to prayer. I ask God's guidance for what I should do. I listen, I write it down. And then I do the same thing on a daily basis, because this is what Dr. Bob did. He would listen, and then he would write down the guidance for that day, 4, 5, 6 things. Call Charlie, go make an amend to Joe, whatever it might be. And then go do it. And there's 12. There's 12. So a spiritual awakening. It's a new state of consciousness and a new state of being. It's the connectedness, the joining link between myself and the divine. All right? And that when I am in tune with that, then my life is going somewhere. My life is not a dead end. All right? I've been transformed. My ego, I think we make a terrible mistake in AA oftentimes. It's like we got to get rid of our ego. Well, God, if you get rid of your ego, you're psychotic. Please do not get rid of your ego. You have to have an ego or you're crazy, all right? But the ego has to be properly aligned with the divine. That's the right use of the mind, And the book says that. We have a mind for a reason, But it needs to be aligned with the heart, to be transformed, to lay hold of a source of strength, power, that God can do for us what I can't do for myself. And so that's what I try to do. I still go to meetings. I still do all that. I've got 52, working on 53 years sober. But it's exciting. It's always new. I never know what I'm going to find. I never know what the guidance is going to be. And it has opened up and transformed me into, I think, the life that I was looking for. And with that, I think I'm going to shut up and turn it back over to the powers that be. So it was good to be with you guys, and thank you for listening.